So I would like to call to order this meeting of the Monroe County Stormwater Management Board, and it is Wednesday, May 12th, 2021. And our first order of business is the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Ms. Fittonia, would you please call the roll?
Githens?
Yes, with the corrections I sent you?
Yes. They were minor.
Yes.
Yep, got those. Jones?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
And Wright Randolph?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and now staff reports. Ms. Fittonia, do you have anything to report to us?
Hi, everyone. I didn't have anything, I guess, major to report. I still wanted to leave the space here in case something did come up that I wanted to discuss with you. Just an update on the stormwater inspector position. The applications close on Friday, so hopefully at the next meeting, we'll have more of an update for you on that. I also wanted to note before we get into the rest of the agenda, working on just some finishing work on the garage, the ponds in the back that we had the contract completed last year. Did some work looking into that. So now that it's springtime and we're going to be able to finish grading and get some more supplemental seed to grow in there. So yes, Julie.
Yeah, I have two unrelated questions. The first one is, what is the status of the stormwater ordinance?
Thank you. So at the last drainage board meeting, I told them that I would like to do a presentation to them at the June meeting, inviting any other local engineers or interested parties to, contribute around that time. And then after that, I'll bring it to the commissioners. I can also bring it to this meeting if you'd like, if you think that would be a good place to explain all of the changes to you before bringing it to a formal commissioners meeting. Dave Schilling said that the only approval I need is from commissioners at one of their meetings, but I have it so in a few weeks, I'm planning on finally presenting some of the updates and hopefully getting that started.
I, for one, would like to see it here, but that's me.
I think that's
I don't know how my colleagues feel.
I agree.
Okay.
Sure. I had that question in to Dave too. So
yeah.
Thanks. I was curious. So
yeah.
The other unrelated question I have, which is also important, is what is the timeline, and maybe Ms. Ridge can address this too, what is the timeline on our stormwater budget? Because it's going to be different because we have the new fee in place. So what is our timeline for looking at prioritizing the use of those funds? And I know we'd have to go to council for 2022 by late summer or the fall. So
I'm going to lean on Lisa to help me with that. I haven't been through the budget process.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because we've been discussing where we go from here. We did the first step. We got the fee increased. That was justified through the studies that have been done. Now we wanted to prioritize. We brought in, we have the new position for inspector, which I think was everybody's #1 priority. We've moved forward with that. So I feel like our next step is prioritizing our capital improvement projects that we have out there. We just finished the right-of-way for Baby Creek. So, how does the board want to proceed with the funding of these projects? I know we discussed bonds. We've just discussed other avenues. So I guess I do want to lean heavily on the board of what they see as a priority. I think that we all set those projects as a priority, and that's why we funded the design of them. Now it's how do we move forward with these? Do we, maybe just tackle Baby Creek and pay for that in 2022 and have that completed. Reach out for Stip and Morse Creek. And then we have Carmola. That's our three big projects. Baby Creek and Stip and Morse Creek are not in an annexed area. I know the annexation is a concern to all of us also, because we will be, everything goes through, we will be losing funding in the stormwater portion of the department. So that's a concern since that's a new, been announced in the last month. But I do still feel that we need to move forward with at least one of these projects that we have waiting. And if that's budgeting it into the 2022 budget and we know where our numbers are, then we set that up as a project and we go to design for that and get it contracted out to be built in 2022. I know Stip and Morse Creek doesn't have any right of way. It's in the permitting process at this point, and then it'll be shovel ready. And then also I do know that I know the funding that's coming to the counties and the cities through the American Act, I know does specifically mention stormwater infrastructure projects. I'm not sure who makes that decision, whether it be, the stormwater board working with the council. I know they get like 14 million this year, 14 million next year. When you look at Baby Creek, it's $1 million. Would the council be willing to use any of that funding to help one of these capital improvement projects to where maybe we're not having to bond? So a lot's happened since the fee was put into place, especially with the annexation and what direction we want to go. And I talked to Kelsey about this last week of, we really need to see what the board wants to prioritize at this point. So if you guys want to throw out some ideas next month in June, and then we can start. I know we're just now doing 144s in the budget, which is budget estimated revenue. So those are due Friday. So we will have that estimation of what the estimated revenue is for stormwater come Friday, and we can forward that on to the board. So that's kind of, we're tiptoeing through it, but we still want to move forward with those projects, but be cautious also with annexation thrown out there.
Could we put this on our agenda for the June meeting and really kind of talk through priorities in terms of equipment and projects and whatnot, and look at costs and kind of review all that in the public eye?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put the 3 projects on there, what the cost is as of to date, where we're at with all 3 of those projects, what our projected revenue will be for 2022 with the new fee increase. And then also I'm not sure we'll have the answers for how personnel is going to be treated at this time. I know from the council meeting last night, we are not we're going to be told that we're not going to put any increases to employees' pay at this point, because we will not have the WIS information back until the end of June. So those, depending on how those come out, could be some adjustments to our budget. And of course, health insurance is going to increase. So we did anticipate those kind of increases, but I think we can present you some good numbers come the June meeting.
I think it would be useful, because I know there's some equipment that we talked about potentially using a bond for, general obligation bond for. It would be useful to have that included, plus the new position, the current positions. I mean, just throw everything in there maybe would be useful for all of us. Okay. Thank you.
And I guess I raised my hand. It's such a small group. Sometimes I'm not sure if the yellow hand or the physical hand's the best. I'm really kind of curious, and I think it would be very helpful if, I know that we're in a position of kind of some uncertainty, but what would the financial impact be if the city did annex some of the property? And I would be curious to see it as like a bottom dollar amount of physical impact, and then from each area that they're proposing, right? And so it kind of gives us a sense of how that's financially going to impact the stormwater budget. And I think that would be very helpful. I wanted to comment to one other thing. As far as prioritizing certain projects, I'm really going to leave it to the stormwater board and staff, and of course you, Lisa, to kind of really show us the information needed to kind of maybe make a decision. But you know more than I do, so I don't want to arbitrarily be like picking something, you know. So please try to build a case. And I know you don't want to maybe prioritize, but please give us strong suggestions of how to move forward. And I think one of the safest things at this particular moment is maybe look at areas that are outside of the city's annexation, because if we go into a bond and it gets annexed, we're still, I think, liable for the debt obligation to that bond, right? So I'm not sure how that worked. Okay, yeah, okay.
It's a little bit over my head, but I did have a conversation with Jeff Cockrell last week concerning, it wasn't stormwater. We were basically talking about our TIF projects that we bond, those road projects. And my understanding from him is the city would have to take over that debt obligation.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you were able to speak to that.
Don't quote me 100%, but we did have that discussion on road projects. I will say that the Baby Creek, Stip Road, Morse Creek, and Carmola, none of those projects are within the annexation area.
Well, that's great. Okay. And then, wow, there was one other thing that you mentioned. It's eluding me right now. I just wanted to comment on what you were mentioning, but that's all I have.
Yeah, John, I will say I have started trying to get the actual number of like dollar amount that we will be losing with the proposed annexation. We have dealt with the storm fee and the increase in everything just via spreadsheets. The original calculations in 2013 were done, contracted out to Image Matters, and I need to basically rectify all the changes that were made via spreadsheets for the past 8 years with, you know, the existing, the original information. And it's getting a little bit complicated, but I'll figure it out. So
I know, and
even a ballpark would be.
Well, and I know in 2017, George Nesbaum, when we had these meetings and discussions extensively, when the original proposal for the 10,000 acres was thrown out there. I do know we have the chart and the numbers in 2017, how that was going to affect. I think we'll basically have to update with what the new fee is, yeah. But we should have the parcel information from 2017.
Yeah, and Jeff McKim had estimated just over $900,000. Again, I want to actually use the data we have for all 20-something thousand entries in there to make sure that we have an accurate number, but for a ballpark, it was just under $1 million.
Okay. Hey, does anyone else have anything to ask Ms. Fitonia about? And if not, we have no old business, so we can move on to the new business, the stormwater expenditure report.
Okay. Stormwater expenditures. So skipping down into the 20s for all the field crews, supplies, maintenance, and everything, $3,505.91. Into the 30s, we had, excuse me, the $1,000 that the board approved for the Lake Monroe Water Fund for helping with education and outreach via web pages, materials, and other things like that. Fuel, we had quite a bit more fuel use in March, hence our discussion last month about fuel usage, $4,609.82. That did go down in April as expected because of all the winter activities that were going on. But if anyone has any questions on that, happy to discuss that. Postage from Connie doing mailings to the $220. Baby Creek, this is hopefully the last of the purchasing, $6,275. Stip Road and Morris Creek, $800 for a task order change. For Stip Road and Morris Creek, there's been quite a lot of discussion the past couple of days on the environmental work. So our consultant is working with the Corps of Engineers on that again, on the EA and everything, just to give you a quick update on that. So at the bottom here, I just want to point out the line here from Monroe County Garage, and that will be deleted. This was carried over in error, we discovered. So the contract for the construction of that was completed, closed out last fall. And I just want to put that note in there because it was mistakenly carried over, and sorry for the confusion on that. So year-to-date use 29% roughly. Does anyone have any questions?
I did want to add that we did go to the council last night. They did do the additional for the new position and the benefits for that position, and also a vehicle. So we've been extensively working with David and Toby at the Highway Garage on type of vehicle. Availability of vehicle is a huge problem these days right now. So we're trying to look at all options for a vehicle for the new inspector, but also maintaining well within our budget, and that's our first goal. So, but other than that, you can't order a brand new vehicle right now at all, and you cannot have a delivery date on it. It could be 2022. So we're reaching out to what we can purchase at a discount on a lot that's existing. And we are working with Greg Cron also. We just had a meeting with him probably about a half hour ago, kind of gave him our ideas, and he was in total agreement in the direction that we would be going. So, and he's our new fleet building manager. So he agrees with the choices of kind of what we're leaning towards. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about the expenditures or comments, additions? Is there any public comment about the expenditures? And I don't believe there is. So we can move on to our second item of new business, the Friends of Lake Monroe. Ms. Mitchell Brooker, do you have, or Ms. Sullivan? I'm not sure who's presenting.
I was going to speak first. Would it be possible for me to share my screen?
Mm-hmm.
There we go, thank you. So my name is Maggie Sullivan, and I am the watershed coordinator for Lake Monroe. And I just wanted to give a really brief update on the watershed management plan. As you may remember, this is a 27-month project. We're about 70% of the way through. Our big focuses are outreach and education, gathering data, and then analyzing that data to make an action plan on how we're going to improve water quality in the lake. In terms of outreach, we started off strong. We had 2 community forums with over 100 participants sharing their concerns about the lake. Since then, I've spoken to over 100 people at different public presentations, groups like this in Monroe County and Brown County, and I'm working on getting into Jackson County. And then I presented to 100 students virtually about watersheds and water quality protection. And then we had over 100 participants at our 2 sampling blitz events where we sent volunteers out to collect water samples in the watershed. We've also been doing some education within our steering committee. We have 20 organizations represented, different areas of expertise. And so we've been out and visiting tree farms and reforestation sites. We went out to a cornfield and talked about crop management and dairy farm management. And we went out to Camp Atterbury and learned about some of the projects they're working on for stream and wetland protection. And ongoing outreach is sending out press releases and putting articles in our newsletter, but we're also hoping to do a public watershed tour this fall and get out and table at some community events, which we planned to do last year, and we all know how last year went. And then we're still working to get those roadside signs installed, hopefully early this summer. In terms of data collection, I started off doing field inspections, looking at stream crossings. I was able to do some of that pre-pandemic, so I was able to take people with me. This photo in the bottom left is a couple of staff members from the Hoosier National Forest. And so I got to learn about how they're upgrading their stream crossings and switching to 3-sided culverts that are more protective of aquatic ecology. But my big focus was documenting conditions in the watershed. So this is a map of the North Fork Salt Creek area looking at livestock. So a red dot represents where there's livestock that has access to a stream. Purple dot, they were there, but they were fenced out of the stream. And then the X's, there was no livestock. So this is helping us understand where we might want to focus our attention. Same thing, this is looking at riparian buffer. So a dark green dot represents an area where there's a lot of vegetation around the stream, over 100 feet wide. A green dot is 20 to 100 feet, orange is 5 to 20, and red is like this photo in the bottom right where there's vegetation, but it's mowed all the way to the edge. So it's not really filtering runoff. It's not doing a great job stabilizing the stream bank. IU SPIA has been collecting water samples for us. They sampled the 4 main creeks coming into the lake and then the tailwaters once a month for a year. So we're going to use that data along with data from stream gauges to calculate pollutant loads. And there was already a stream gauge on North Fork in Nashville, but as you probably remember, there's a new stream gauge that was put in on the South Fork of Salt Creek last January, so about a year and a half ago. And that was a joint project, Friends of Lake Monroe and Nature Conservancy and you guys and City of Bloomington Utilities and the Lake Monroe Water Fund, which was just getting started. But that's been great to have this flow information. And then we'll also have some extra sampling information from City of Bloomington Utilities. They've got a storm team that's collecting during storm events. This photo was taken after a pretty heavy rain and you can see how brown the water is. We know that a lot of sediment and nutrients move during storm events. So we're excited to have that extra information. And then SPIA also collected samples in the lake, and that's supplementing data that we're getting from the Army Corps of Engineers. And their water quality specialist actually sits on our steering committee. And as part of our conversations about this project, he's doing additional sampling this summer. So instead of just water samples, they'll be doing sediment sampling to take a look at how the sediment might be impacting water quality. So I'm really excited that that program's happening as well. And then I mentioned our sampling blitz. So we went out to 125 sites, 2 different times. Because some of the streams were dry in the fall, we ended up with 211 samples total. But this has been a great way to get a sort of snapshot overview of the watershed. And we were able to leverage this sampling data, the Indiana Geological and Water Survey, which has been very supportive. They provide my office space and GIS support. They're looking at studying springs across the uplands area. And so they took all of our samples from the fall blitz and were analyzing them for conductivity to see if they could identify any salt springs. Back in the 1820s, there were multiple salt works along North Fork where people actually put in wells and boiled down the brine to manufacture salt. And they want to know if they're still producing. So I'm excited to see what those results say. And then our last sampling initiative is looking at E. coli and trying to determine if the source is Bessie, Bambi, or Bobby. Well, basically human or animal. So we were originally planning to do 10 samples, but Brown County Regional Sewer District has the same question for their sewer planning purposes. So we did 10 samples and they did an additional 7. And so we'll have almost twice as much data to work with and they'll have our additional data to work with. So that's been a nice collaboration. We're going to use the results, and I was hoping to have more results to present to you today, but with COVID, everything has just slowed down a little. But we'll be looking at pollutant loads for E. coli, sediment, and nutrients. And then we can look at our targets, calculate how much we need to reduce, see if we can identify any critical areas that seem to be contributing more, and then choose projects to meet our goals. And that's what we're calling our action plan that we're hoping to put together this summer. And that's all voluntary measures. This is not about forcing anyone to do anything. And we want to think broadly. We have a very diverse watershed, so we want to make sure we're looking at agriculture and forests and residential and commercial. But the key idea is this needs to be projects that have a measurable impact. So it could be on the ground projects, it could be education and training that changes people's behaviors. But some examples might be restoring riparian buffer, so planting those plants along streams. Could be restoring a wetland area. This is bean blossom bottoms, which is not in our watershed, but a very cool project. Wetlands do a great job of providing a sink for nutrients and sediment, as well as some flood control. or maybe restoring stream channels, putting back in those meanders and a nice healthy floodplain. It'll also likely involve a lot of what we call best management practices. So at home, maybe that's maintaining your septic system. If you're a farmer, that's fencing your animals out of the stream or using cover crops. And then you guys are all super familiar with erosion control on construction sites. And some of those same techniques are also appropriate in forest management, making sure that those skid trails are designed in a way that minimizes impact to water quality. We'll also be looking at education, so general public education, similar to a lot of things Connie talks about, but also potentially some more specific training for, say, foresters or farmers or contractors. In terms of specific projects, we're still getting into what exactly we want to propose, but one thing we're looking at is lakeshore stabilization. One possible location is the Amy Weingartner Brannigan Peninsula. The Sycamore Land Trust is interested in working with us. Another is the Charles Dean Wilderness Peninsula, and the Forest Service, one of their members sits on our steering committee, and he actually got inspired by our talk about Lake Monroe and put in an application and got funding to do an initial feasibility study on how they might address erosion here. It's and the additional challenge that it's a wilderness area, so they don't want to just come in and put in riprap. So they're looking at some pretty innovative potential approaches. Likewise, we've been talking with DNR. They have a number of parcels of land along North Fork and South Fork Salt Creek that they lease out as farmland. But some of the fields flood pretty frequently. So they're looking at, would it make sense to convert some of that to a riparian forest or a forested wetland? And we're really hopeful that makes a lot of sense for the watershed. And then Brown County Fairgrounds, they had a design done a little while ago looking at Greasy Creek runs straight through the fairgrounds. So they were looking at, could they put a little more separation between their livestock barns and the creek, and maybe have a heavy use area protection and restore the riparian buffer here, and maybe even across the street onto the high school property as a really nice showcase, since a lot of people come through the fairgrounds during the fair and for other events. We've been talking a little bit with Brown County State Park about horse manure management, not the sexiest of topics, but a big issue at the horse camps. They have a lot to deal with. And then we really would love to talk with you guys about projects in Monroe County and if there might be some potential for collaboration. I know Kelsey knows that there's some restrictions when you're talking about 319 grant funding and MS4s, but there are also ways that we could work within those limits. So it could be an on-the-ground project or events or education. You know, I've done a little bit of work with Connie through the SWEET team meetings and looking forward to doing more collaboration. In terms of timeline, this project ends in January when we publish the watershed management plan. But the way that funding works, we're hoping to get our action plan together this summer and apply for an implementation grant through the 319 program this fall. Because then if that is funded, the funds would come next fall. So that's where we're at, trying to get all these things together. But basically our next steps are looking at that water quality data, analyzing it, seeing what needs to happen, developing that action plan, and continuing to build our community collaborations and community support. So that was all I wanted to say today. I know Sherry's got a couple things she wanted to share as well, but if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you for having me.
Maybe we should hear from Sherry first before questions.
Okay. Can I share my screen? Thank you for having us. I think Maggie has done a great job of letting you know what we're up to. And what I would like to talk with you about is support for our watershed coordinator. Maggie is on contract with Friends of Lake Monroe through matching funds that were contributed by the County Stormwater Board and the City of Bloomington, with a little more added from the 319 grant itself. And I think most of you were there present when I came and asked for that support. I am at that time I said I would be back, and because I think it's really important for us to have this local commitment for watershed coordinator. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the significance of the resource, the value of our contribution, the importance for continuity and commitment, and then our request for support. I need to close this so that I can see what I've got here. Okay, there we go. As you all know, I'm sure Lake Monroe is our sole source for drinking water. And this is huge. We couldn't have Bloomington, we couldn't have Indiana University without this resource. And so it's extremely important for us to continuously work to protect and improve water quality. The lake also provides recreational benefits that improve the quality of life and attract business to the area. There are also local economic benefits that flow from the marinas, the gas stations, hotels, restaurants, and more. And the watershed coordinator is so important to our work as in developing and implementing the watershed management plan. Before the Friends of Lake Monroe was formed, there was no grassroots watershed group, which was really crazy for the lake of this importance, and no watershed management plan. And we've come a long way since then in forming the Friends of Lake Monroe and getting a grant for the watershed management plan. Now, what our goal is to keep that going and make sure that it's sustainable for the long term. Just a little bit about the value of the lake. The drinking water value was estimated by the Corps at $150 million per year. That's just the water that's in there that could be used for drinking water. So the previous investment by the Monroe County Stormwater of $37,500 enabled us to get $120,000 investment by IDEM for the current grant, plus another $37,500 from the city of Bloomington. The future return from the next implementation grant should also actually be larger. And you hear a lot about administrative costs, and I think it's really important to understand that out of that money, that almost $200,000, that only $1,500 came to the Friends of Lake Monroe for administrative costs. We are doing our work from our budget, the part that is the Friends of Lake Monroe, not the watershed coordinator, and working as volunteers. One of the values that Friends of Lake Monroe and Watershed Coordinator brings is awareness. This is something early on that we worked on a lot to increase awareness of the public of the importance of the resource and the importance of preserving water quality. Maggie has done a great job of reaching out to the press. We've had articles in Herald Times, Brown County Democrat, and Jackson County Banner. We've also, as Maggie mentioned, had community forums where over 100 people attended and really got involved in identifying what the problems are and what their concerns are, and talking a little bit about solutions. We've also been involved in educational activities, both in terms of educating our people with the steering committee, public, like the Southeast Park was the most recent public display that Maggie worked on. And then also social media. We have, I believe it's around 500 followers on our Facebook page, and that's a very active group. And then we have our website as well, which has lots of information on it. So all of this, we comes through the watershed coordinator and our volunteers. These volunteers include our board, and our board works very hard to keep things going and make Friends of Lake Monroe a vital resource for our community. We also have a steering committee with 20 different organizations represented. And we have a monthly trash cleanups where we get the members of the community involved. A lot of people like activities that are outdoors, and so we're working to increase that. So people get involved with the lake. The more you're involved with it, especially the cleanup part, then the more you can appreciate it. We had the sampling blitz that Maggie talked about. We also put out a newsletter about every 2 months, and that goes out to, I think, about 200 people. And we were involved in lake clarity sampling that came directly as a request from some property owners in Monroe County. So all of this was done with volunteer work, and the importance of that is the value that you get from our work. This comes to the community without a lot of it without cost. And it also helps the communities have a sense of ownership for the lake. There's a really important aspect of our support for the watershed coordinator contract, and that is that one, the cash match shows our local commitment to the project. And this is important for funders. They see that, our local community has a deep commitment to making Lake Monroe water quality the best that it can be. So it also demonstrates to our volunteers that the community supports us in our work, and that's very important for us. And then we need this sustained local commitment. There have been previous efforts to have a watershed group, and Steve Howard was one of those people who had tried to get something going and noted that they failed because of the lack of sustained local commitment. And this is partly to do with this kind of tricky aspect of how the watershed is divided. The people who live in Monroe County are the main beneficiaries of the drinking water, and yet there is a vast amount of the watershed that is not in Monroe County and is in Brown and Jackson County. And so it's always hard to get the synergy going between the three counties. So that was part of what was cited as why that effort failed. And we want to make sure that we are a sustainable effort to, it's so important. So the watershed coordinator, our watershed coordinator, develops relationships that foster this collaboration. And these don't happen overnight. If we get different watershed coordinators who come in at different times, depending on when we have funding, then it's hard to develop those relationships. We're starting over from scratch, and that definitely is not a good way to have a good relationship. The other thing is that a long-term contract for a watershed coordinator, so something that where we can hopefully keep an individual committed to our project, that person becomes the knowledge base that is very specific to Lake Monroe. There's people out there that know about lakes and so forth. But it's great having someone who says, oh yeah, I know that area. I was out there. I drove out there and did this survey, and here's what I saw. We don't have to look into, do any research. We've got that person right there, and they know about the data, and they know how we've analyzed the data. It's really hard if we're working from one contract to the next contract with IDEM and with other funders as well. to get this long-term or full-time commitment from a watershed coordinator. And we have gotten that full-time commitment from Maggie, and it's been really just a godsend. She has done such excellent work for us, and we have been often commented on how lucky we are to have such a dedicated and talented person in this contract. The action plan that is going to be developed as a part of the watershed management plan definitely needs a watershed coordinator to implement it. So there's all sorts of reasons why we are going to need a great watershed coordinator moving forward. I gotta find my drink. Oh, here it is, because I'm getting kind of froggy in the throat. So what we need is to fund our watershed coordinator during the gap between the grants. And Maggie explained that her funding ends in January of 2022. That leaves a period, assuming we would get the next 319 implementation grant from February to October, where that position is unfunded. And we would like to keep that moving, keep that momentum going, lay groundwork for our implementation projects and outreach education. So that would be 9 months at $4,133 per month, which comes out to be $37,197. Half of that amount we will be asking for from the city of Bloomington, and half we would be asking the Stormwater Board for. The second thing that we need is matching funds for the 319 grant, and we would like to, as we have in the past, use the funding for the watershed coordinator as match for the 319. That grant would be from about November 2022 to October 2024. So it would be 24 months at the same amount and monthly, and that would be $99,192, of which half of that we would seek support from the county and half from the city. So what I'm proposing and asking for is that the Monroe County Stormwater Board fund a watershed coordinator during the gap between the grants, and commit watershed coordinator funding as a match for the 319 grant that we are putting in August. And then that funding would be granted up to the full amount. And this is what we did last time, is said we would fund the Monroe County Stormwater Board funded the full amount needed, and then reduced that amount appropriately to as a result of what we get from the city and if the grant were not awarded. So it was a funding that was committed up to that a certain amount, rather than this is how much we will be providing. Your support is vital to our success, and our success is vital to our community. So I hope that we can depend on you for continued support. And Maggie or I either would be happy to field questions.
Thank you. That was a very interesting presentation. Are there any questions for either Maggie or Sherry?
Yes, what happens long-term if you don't get the 319 grant going forward?
If we don't get the 319 grant, well, we would probably be looking for other sources of funding. We will be looking for other sources of funding, even if we do get the 319 grant, and put in another grant proposal again the following year for the 319. But I mean, in terms of your funding, we would have to come back to you and say, well, we didn't get the grant. So, you know, you have no obligation for those funds if we don't get the grant. Tron? Or do I, or do you, or?
No, that's fine. It's a small group. I guess my question is this like, I guess maybe I wasn't paying attention the best, or I didn't catch it. Is this something that you're thinking needs to be in place indefinitely, or is this just to push it out for 2 more years? I mean, I support the collaborative efforts here because I do think it has a profound impact on a number of different things, especially things that are stormwater related, but even outside of that. So right now we're looking at another cost share initiative to continue to fund the watershed coordinator, but could you address that? Is this something that you think that the Friends are trying to put in place indefinitely, or do you think like there is a timeline where you wouldn't necessarily continuously be looking for funding support? Not saying I wouldn't support it, just that's a real question to be.
Yeah, and that's a good question, and I really haven't thought beyond these next 2.5 years that we're talking about in terms of what the funding might look like and whether or not we can, I noticed that Jane is here. We've talked with the water fund, and that might be a possible source of funding for the watershed coordinator. What I feel is important is that we do have a commitment from the community that this is something that we want to sustain into the future long term. And it may not necessarily come from the community in the same way next time, say, as this time, but at this point, this is where we are. Does that answer your question?
More or less, I guess you're not prepared for that question, but
yeah, I mean, it's we're building this, our organization, the Water Fund is building up their organization, and so what happens 3 years from now is hard to know.
Yeah, and I get that, and I guess I'll just one further comment before I pass it to Julie. I do like the increments, 2 years, and if we're not certain, 1 year, and maybe even if we can scale that back, if it doesn't look like it's, where we can't really quantify that answer quite yet, because we don't necessarily know what we need to address and how much coordination needs to be done to resolve some of the issues that are, uncovered, discovered, or some of the issues that we already know are present. So I do like the incremental approach of 2 years, and maybe, that can taper down or grow. But I'm just really curious, how long you think that the stormwater can be supportive in this if we choose to get behind and support it. So thank you. That was my final comment.
All right. Any other? Julie?
Yeah, so this needs to be written up like an MOU, like we did in the past, I think. And I wonder how folks on the board feel about this, how they'd want this written up. So for example, I would say that maybe this could be contingent on City of Bloomington providing support. And maybe we set out 2 different levels in dollar amounts, one based on a grant, one based on receiving the grant, one based on not receiving the grant, this particular grant. I'm wondering if that's something we could do with an MOU.
Yeah.
And can I add a comment to that, Julie, please?
Please do.
To me, I'm seeing 2 separate requests almost. There's a request for funding in the gap year, and then there's a request for match for the 319 grant. I'd like to just pose the question for the 319 grant. Is there anything that, like, would you be opposed to match for cost share projects implementation rather than funding for the coordinator? Like, are they going to distinguish between what type of match if we can dedicate implementation funds, say from the Soil and Water Conservation District, we already give them $30,000 a year. If for the sake of the application for the grant, we can dedicate implementation funds as match. I guess I don't think they have rules against, you know, requesting funding for the watershed coordinator. And I guess I'm leaning more in that direction since we already give so much money towards implementation in the county. I'd like to.
So is that a question for me?
I guess discussion amongst the board members. Sherry, if you'd like to provide feedback. Yeah.
Well, I do think, you know, there is, you know, a possibility of using in-kind contributions of different types in order for match. And, but it is competitive. And this, this cash match increases our competitiveness. And, you know, it really shows, it shows the local commitment. This is the reason that I have asked for this is, you know, that we do want to show that local commitment and we want to come in with a strong proposal.
This would be cash match for implementation projects. Because we already give money directly to Soil and Water for on the ground projects. And I can talk to Martha on, you know, targeting the Lake Monroe watershed in those implementation years so that you can count that as cash match, so that they can have some projects where they're partially funded by, you know, the SWCD funds, the 319 funding, or something like that. So my comment was intending that to be cash match, not in kind.
I see. Yeah, that puts it in a different light. I didn't quite understand that because it would be coming from it would be projects coming from the Soil and Water Conservation District. So, okay. And then the other thing, yeah, we could work with that. And to some extent, the other thing that the cash inflow brings us is cash flow. So we are able at this time to pay our watershed coordinator as billed because we have the cash flow from the cash match. If we didn't have that cash match, we don't have that type of budget. So we would be asking a watershed coordinator to bill us and then wait until we are reimbursed by IDEM, which is about a month, I suppose. Is that right, Maggie? Do you think it's about a month that we're waiting when we do that with IU? So that's another reason to have that actual cash on hand, but it doesn't have to be the full amount. And again, I say, if this is work that was already going, that's why I guess I think of it in kind. I'm a little confused because if this is work that was already going to happen, then does that make it I don't quite understand that.
I think what Kelsey's saying is if Monroe County Soil and Water District agreed, and I'm sure they would, we have a really good relationship with Martha, that they would basically take the program that they normally do doing cost shares on the ground and say, well, this year is just going to be within the Lake Monroe watershed, and it's just going to be projects that were approved in the watershed management plan. And okay. So it would, in terms of the grant application, it would just look like that money was the cash match for the grant. And then in terms of on the ground, you know, Martha and I would work together in terms of the implementation, or whoever the watershed coordinator is, and make it happen. And but yeah, that your cash flow issue is still.
Yeah, so. and then I guess my question would be, of the projects that we've looked at, this would be more, I think, what cover crop type of things or that they're looking at, or and is there much of that in the watershed to, you know, those projects? Have we identified anything?
It would match pretty closely with what they've done in the past, but obviously they've in the past funded projects that are not in the watershed, and they've funded some projects that would probably not be on our list in terms of, you know, I don't know how highly we'll rank invasive species removal as an example, may not be our top priority, whereas cover crops obviously would.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be something we would need to look at because, you know, if we are going through our process of looking at prioritizing, you know, a lot of what I'm seeing right now is not far from Monroe County, it's not necessarily ag-related as much as when we look at South Fork, that seems to be more ag-related. But that's something that we'll find out as we move forward. It's not something we can put our hands on right today.
All right, are there any other questions?
I guess just one, as far as how it was indicated to maybe proceed, do we want to do like a temperature check or, you know, how the board feels of if they do move forward and do present this to us? As I'll express my position, and I'm favorable. So I'd recommend how Julie presented how we could move this forward, and I would be curious to look that over. So I'm supportive as of today.
I guess it might not really be necessary to indicate whether or not you're supportive, but whether or not you want to move forward to see the MOU and make a decision from there.
That's what I meant. You just said it better.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone, Commissioner Gibbons, would you like to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I feel that Lake Monroe is really, really critical to the whole area in so many ways. And so, yeah, I would like to see an MOU be presented to us.
Thank you. And Commissioner Thomas, I'm guessing since you suggested it that you.
No, I hate the idea. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's, I think this is it's a great group. I'm proud to be a member of the steering committee, but I think that I think we just need some real clarity because this is a stormwater fee. I think we just need real clarity on ensuring that there's a match coming from the city, and also what happens if there isn't a grant, what happens if there is, and how that changes the funding commitment from the Stormwater Board. So, thanks.
Okay, I'd have to say I feel much the same as the others. Lake Monroe is incredibly important, and I'm very impressed by the work that you've done so far. That's really the amount of data that you collected and all of the collaborations, and it actually makes it seem quite hopeful that we will be able to keep the lake going. So yes, I definitely would like to see an MOU, see what the parameters are for this, and which I guess you would work on that with Kelsey or with David Schilling, or both, or Lisa. I'm not sure.
I would say, in speaking about our budget and everything in the coming years, annexation, our discussion at next month's board meeting regarding capital improvement projects and all of that. As I'm preparing for that, I would like to see how this request does fit in with our budget, with our projected income for the coming years, the expenses that we've already sort of planned for the fee increase. And then, of course, just a fair warning to everyone, come January 1st, 2024, it's going to have to be a lot different. You know, and we're gonna have to prepare for losing almost $1 million per year. So I will look into the budget for next year and give you a clearer picture by the next board meeting on what a commitment like this will look like in the next couple of years. Okay.
Thank you. And I guess probably we should see if there's any public comment on this item. If the board has no more comments or questions, and I guess there isn't any public here. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Ms. Martin.
I just want to say that I'm blown away with the work that Maggie and Sherry and the Friends of Lake Monroe have done. It has been a Herculean task. I've attended a number of those public meetings, but I just want to lend my support. And at some point in time, when we have enough money raised at the Lake Monroe Water Fund, I'm hopeful that Friends of Lake Monroe and their good work will be a prime beneficiary. So that's all.
Great, thank you. That's good to hear. Anything else? Well, if there is nothing else, at this point on the agenda, is there any public input for items that are not on our agenda? Yes, Ms. Martin.
Me again. As part of our outreach and public education with the use of your most generous funds, first of all, I wanted to thank you all for your support. And I also wanted to say that for those of you who may watch now or in the future on CATS, and to the rest of the public, please go to our website, lakemonroewaterfund.org, lakemonroewaterfund.org, and donate if you can. We will be instigating some fundraising projects, perhaps something like Adopt a Gallon or Dunk the Mayor in the fall of this year. And so hopefully we will soon have enough money to be able to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll volunteer for Dunk a Politician if you want.
I've got you down.
The water would have to be pretty warm before I'd agree to do that.
I was going to say, Tron, are you going to sit in the tank, or are you willing to throw the baseball or whatever it is? I mean, which one?
I'll sit in the tank. I'll sit there. I'll volunteer.
All right. If there is no other public comment, then our next meeting will be on June 9th, 2021 at 3 o'clock, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.